The morning sun cast golden light across Victoria Island's glass towers. Dr. Ebuka Nwosu stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his apartment, adjusting his Rolex. Behind him, his wife Adiz sat in her wheelchair, 7 months pregnant, hands folded in her lap. "I'll be at the hospital until late," he said without turning around. "Another surgery at 4. Blessing should be here by 8. "Thank you," Adiz replied softly. He grabbed his briefcase and planted a brief kiss on her forehead before leaving. The door clicked shut, and the apartment fell silent. 20 minutes later, the doorbell chimed. Blessing arrived in expensive perfume, her nurse's uniform tailored just slightly too tight. "Good morning, Ma," she said brightly, though something flickered in her eyes that didn't match her smile. Throughout the day, neighbors who passed would shake their heads in admiration. "That Dr. Nwosu is such a good man, Mrs. Okonkwo from 12B would say. Taking care of that poor woman and her pregnant too. A saint," Mrs. Adelik would agree. But there were things they didn't see. The way Ebuka's warmth evaporated when visitors left. The way Blessing's hands moved more roughly when no one was watching. The way Adiz was spoken about rather than spoken to. And there were things nobody saw at all. The way Adiz tracked every movement when Ebuka and Blessing stood close in the kitchen. The private phone she kept hidden in her wheelchair cushion. The hushed, urgent calls she made when completely alone. When 5 o'clock came and both had left for the day, Adiz sat by the window. The setting sun painted her face in gold and shadow. Slowly, she looked down at her feet. Her right toe moved. Then her left. All 10 toes flexed with perfect control. A small smile crossed her face before she carefully arranged her features back into stillness. The game was just beginning. The rain came down hard that Thursday night, turning Victoria Island's streets to rivers. Inside the apartment, Adiz had positioned her wheelchair near the bedroom door, appearing to doze while waiting for Ebuka. Her head tilted to one side, her breathing slow and even. But beneath her closed eyelids, she was completely awake. She heard Ebuka's key around 9:30, then Blessing's familiar laugh. "We need to be more careful." Ebuka's voice drifted from the bedroom.
"Why?"
Blessing's sounded playful. "She suspects nothing. What's she going to do? Will herself to a lawyer?" Their laughter was sharp, but Adiz didn't flinch. "After the baby comes, I'll file for divorce," Ebuka continued. "We'll say the stress became too much. People will understand. And then we can finally be together properly. A real wedding. Eco hotel, maybe. You'll have it. We'll have everything. Her father left nothing but debt anyway. That compound in Enugu is falling apart." Adiz's fingernails pressed into her palms, but her face remained peaceful. "I almost feel sorry for her," Blessing said. "Don't waste your pity. She was convenient when I needed a wife. Now I need something different." They moved away, and Adiz finally opened her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek, but it wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. Because 3 days ago, a letter had arrived from Barrister Okeke. A letter about her father's estate. A letter that changed everything. 6 months earlier, it had started with tingling in her toes. Pins and needles dancing upward. The doctors had said permanent paralysis, irreversible damage. But her body whispered something different. She didn't tell Ebuka. That same week, she'd found Blessing's lipstick in their bathroom. Ebuka had started coming home smelling of jasmine instead of antiseptic. So she made a phone call instead. Mr. Okonkwo, a physiotherapist from her university days, arrived every morning at 5:45 through the service entrance. The first time she tried to stand, her legs buckled. She bit through her lip to keep from crying out. Mr. Okonkwo caught her, his hands steady. "Slowly, Mrs. Adiz. Rome wasn't built in a day." But she didn't want slow. The pain was extraordinary, atrophied muscles screaming as she forced them to remember. Sweat poured down her face during those sessions, but she never made a sound. "Why the secrecy?" Mr. Okonkwo asked once, after she'd managed 10 steps. "Because I need to see who celebrates my paralysis before I show them my strength." By 6:45, she'd be back in her wheelchair, showered and composed. Mr. Okonkwo would slip away, and Blessing would arrive at 8, never suspecting. Adiz unfolded the letter again, though she'd memorized every word. Her father, Ichio Koro, had worked 35 years in the Ministry of Commerce. Same bus every morning. Same lunch of rice and stew. Same 3 rotating suits. Everyone assumed he was just another underpaid civil servant. Everyone was wrong. While maintaining his government salary, he'd quietly invested in Nigeria's tech revolution. Early stakes in fintech startups. Telecommunications companies before mobile phones became ubiquitous. Real estate purchased when Victoria Island was considered too far, now worth 50 times what he'd paid. The letter detailed properties in Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt. A flat in Knightsbridge he'd never visited. Offshore accounts. Investment portfolios across 3 continents. $700 million. She remembered her father in his small parlor in Enugu, reading by lamplight. "Adiz, my daughter," he used to say, "the lion that roars the loudest is not always the one that eats. Sometimes the wisest predator waits in silence." She thought he was sharing proverbs. She hadn't realized he was teaching her his philosophy. His personal note made her hand shake. "My precious daughter, if you are reading this, I am gone. I lived small so you could live large. Every kobo I invested was a brick in the fortress I built around your future. The world will underestimate you because you are a woman, because you are kind, because they mistake gentleness for weakness. Let them. A warrior who is underestimated has already won half the battle. Use this wealth wisely. Use it justly. And remember, real power never announces itself." Asterisk. Adiz reached for her hidden phone. Barrister Okeke answered immediately. "I need to see you," she said. "My husband is planning to divorce me. He thinks I'm worthless. I'd like to show him exactly how wrong he is." The envelope landed on the coffee table with a soft thud. Ibuka stood across from her, hands in his pockets. Beside him, Blessing wore a sympathetic expression, and on her left hand, a diamond ring caught the light. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation," Ibuka began. "This marriage hasn't been working for a long time." Adiz said nothing, hands folded over her belly. "You need to understand, this isn't personal. It's just reality. You're 7 months pregnant, you're disabled, you have no income. I've done my duty as a husband, more than most men would have. We're trying to handle this with dignity," Blessing added. Ibuka held out the envelope. "These are divorce papers. You'll get your personal belongings, your old Honda. I'm being fair." Adiz read slowly. The apartment gone. The SUV she'd helped finance gone. The furniture she'd chosen gone. 3 years reduced to a used car, and what she could pack. "I'll provide minimal child support. But honestly, Adiz, you should go back to your father's compound in Enugu. Find someone more suited to your situation." "We're getting married next month," Blessing announced. "At the Eco Hotel. We'd appreciate if you were gone by then." Adiz looked between them. Ibuka, who she'd sacrificed everything for. Blessing, who was already 2 months pregnant herself, she now revealed, timing it perfectly. "Where do I sign?" Adiz asked. Ibuka pointed, watching carefully. Her signature was steady. "Good," he said, snatching the papers back. "You have 2 weeks." The next 2 weeks moved like a chess game where only one player could see the board. While Ibuka and Blessing sampled wedding cakes, Adiz dismantled their world with surgical precision. Barrister Okeke's office was a glass tower in Ikoyi. The distinguished lawyer in his 60s had known her father well. He stood when she wheeled in. "Your father spoke of you often. He said you had his patience and your mother's fire." The papers told an extraordinary story. Investment portfolios. Property deeds to buildings she'd passed 1,000 times. Bank statements that made her dizzy. "There's something else," Okeke said. "The apartment at 15 Kingsway Road. Your father purchased it 7 years ago. When you married, he transferred it to your name through a trust. Your husband has no legal claim." Adiz's hands stilled. "Ibuka thinks he owns it. Many men think they own things that were never theirs." The SUV is financed through an account in your name. Even the seed capital for his clinic, 60 million naira, came from your pre-marriage savings. The irony was perfect. Ibuka was divorcing her to escape poverty that didn't exist, standing on wealth that was entirely hers. I need documentation of everything, Adiz said. Property deeds, account statements, financing agreements. For the divorce proceedings? For something better. While lawyers prepared documents, Adiz intensified her sessions with Mr. Okonkwo. She could walk now for 30 minutes without support. She practiced in heels, practiced standing with grace. She shopped in boutiques she'd only window shopped before, selecting an emerald asoebi that made her pregnancy look regal. She hired a stylist, a makeup artist. She wasn't just planning to attend Ibuka's wedding. She was planning to make it memorable. Meanwhile, Blessing moved into the apartment early, hanging her clothes in closets, rearranging furniture. She didn't know she was decorating someone else's property. Neither did Ibuka, signing contracts for his clinic using money already frozen by Okeke's maneuvering. The night before the wedding, Adiz stood alone in her hotel suite, looking at her reflection. Not a woman seeking revenge, but a woman who'd found clarity. The Eco Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and gold leaf. Dr. Ibuka Nwosu stood at the altar in pristine white agbada, looking every inch the successful surgeon who'd overcome tragedy to find love. Blessing was radiant in white lace, her early pregnancy hidden by expert tailoring. The ceremony had been perfect, the vows spoken with convincing emotion. Now, as dinner was served and champagne flowed, Ibuka raised his glass. Politicians, business moguls, medical elite, they all lifted their glasses in response. To new beginnings, he declared. The doors opened. The sudden hush was immediate. 300 guests drew breath collectively. Adiz stood in the doorway. Not sitting, not wheeling, but standing tall in emerald that seemed to capture every light in the room. Her 7-month pregnancy was luminous. Barrister Okeke stood to her right, Mr. Okonkwo to her left. She walked forward. Each step deliberate, devastating. The crowd parted, phones already recording. Ibuka's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. Crystal shattered on marble. Blessing's hand flew to her throat, color draining from her face. Surprise, my dear ex-husband, Adiz's voice rang clear. I've been walking for 7 months. I simply chose not to tell the man who was betraying me. The murmurs started, rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Mrs. Okonkwo grabbed her husband's arm. Society bloggers scrambled for better angles. Ibuka tried to speak. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. Blessing stepped backward, then again, as if distance could protect her. Adiz continued until she stood feet from the head table, from the wedding cake neither would ever cut. You must be wondering why I'm here. Barrister Okeke stepped forward, briefcase landing on the head table between the centerpiece and cake. Around the ballroom, phones kept recording. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Mrs. Adiz's legal counsel. I have documents that will interest everyone present, particularly the groom. He began laying papers across the white tablecloth with methodical precision. Property deeds, bank statements, investment portfolios. Ibuka found his voice. This is my wedding. You have no. I have every right. Adiz cut him off. Because everything you think you own belongs to me. The ballroom erupted in gasps. Okeke began reading with courtroom cadence. The apartment at 15 Kingsway Road, purchased by Mr. Ichi Okoro, transferred to his daughter's name upon marriage. The Mercedes SUV, financed through Mrs. Adiz's account. The 60 million naira for the private clinic, withdrawn from Mrs. Adiz's pre-marriage savings. With each revelation, Ibuka's face transitioned from shock to ash gray. Guests leaned closer, recording everything. You divorced me because you thought I was worthless, Adiz said, her voice shaking now with controlled fury. You threw me away 7 months pregnant, believing my father left nothing but debt. She stepped closer. Ibuka retreated, bumping the table. My father, whom you disrespected at every opportunity, was building an empire while you were still in medical school. Tech, startups, telecommunications, real estate across Nigeria and London. He invested in Africa's future. The silence was absolute. $700 million. That's what my father left me. That's the worthless inheritance you mocked. Blessing made a strangled sound and turned to run, but the crowd was too thick. Adiz placed her hand on her belly. You married her thinking I had nothing. You believed you were trading up her father's business connections for my poverty. But tell him, Blessing. Tell him about your father's company. Blessing's silence was damning. Her father's import business is drowning in debt. 12 million naira owed to banks, revenue down 70%. She saw a successful surgeon. You saw a society connection. Two people picking through what you thought were my bones. Ibuka turned to Blessing, betrayal clear on his face. She fled through the crowd, white dress trailing. Okeke produced one final document in a sealed bag. There's also Mrs. Adiz's accident 3 years ago. According to the investigating officer's report, mysteriously buried after a payment to the police, the brake lines had been tampered with. Several guests gasped. Ibuka's mother collapsed into her chair. I don't know if you tried to kill me, Adiz said quietly, exhaustion replacing fire. I'll probably never know. But I know you killed something more important. Trust, love, faith. You killed the woman who believed in you. She looked around the ballroom at all the witnessing eyes. Let this be a lesson. You cannot measure a person's worth by their bank account or physical ability. You cannot mistake silence for submission or kindness for weakness. She turned back to Ibuka, who stood broken and trembling. You could have had everything. A woman who loved you, who would have built with you. Instead, you chose cruelty over compassion. Adiz moved toward the exit, flanked by her lawyer and physiotherapist. At the doorway, she paused. The locks change tomorrow. The car gets repossessed tomorrow. Tomorrow, reality arrives. She placed her hand on her belly one last time. And tomorrow, I begin building the life my daughter deserves, where she'll never pretend to be less than she is to make a small man feel big. As she walked out, half the ballroom applauded. Outside, the Lagos night air was warm and full of promise. Mr. Okonkwo offered his arm, but Adiz shook her head gently. I'd like to walk on my own now, she said. And she did. 3 months later, Adiz gave birth to a healthy daughter she named Chinyu. God owns. Not because she believed in divine revenge, but because some gifts arrive only when you've stopped expecting them. Ibuka's clinic never opened. His medical license came under review when questions arose about the accident investigation. Blessing left him before the baby was born, moving back to her father's struggling business. Adiz used her inheritance to establish the Ichi Okoro Foundation, funding medical care and mobility equipment for disabled women across Nigeria. She never remarried. She didn't need to. On Chinyu's first birthday, she stood in the foundation's new office, her daughter on her hip, looking out at Victoria Island's towers. Your grandfather taught me something, she whispered to Chinyu. Real power never announces itself. It simply walks through the door when it's ready. Chinyu grabbed her mother's face with both tiny hands and laughed. And Adiz laughed too, because some victories aren't about bringing others down. They're about finally, blessedly, standing up.